The Grand Chamber was huge. It was bigger than any building on Earth. The ceiling went up so high that clouds formed inside it. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to eat the light. On those walls hung the flags of 47 species. These were the species that the Vullen had conquered over 3,000 years. In the center of the chamber sat a throne made of bones. Real bones. The bones of kings and queens from 100 different worlds. On that throne sat High Commander Torvax. He was tall, even for a Vullen. His skin was gray and rough like stone. He had 4 eyes, all of them red. When he spoke, his voice made the floor shake. Today was a special day. Today, the Vullen would declare war on the humans. Representatives from all the conquered species filled the chamber. They stood in rows, watching and waiting. Some of them remembered when they were free. Most of them had been born as slaves. They had never known anything else. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened. Everyone turned to look. A single human walked in. She was small. That was the first thing everyone noticed. The Vullen were 3 meters tall. Their soldiers were even bigger. This human woman was barely 1.5 meters. She had black hair tied back in a simple tail. She wore plain gray clothes. Nothing fancy. Nothing that showed power or wealth. And she was reading a book, not a datapad. Not a screen. An actual book made of paper. The kind that humans had used hundreds of years ago. She walked slowly, turning pages as she went. She did not look up. She did not seem to notice the thousands of eyes watching her. Her name was Una. She was the human envoy to the Vullen Dominion. Torvax stood up from his throne. The movement was slow and full of power. When he spoke, his voice filled every corner of the massive chamber. Human, you stand before the might of the Vullen Dominion. Una turned a page. We have conquered 47 species. We have burned 1,000 worlds. We have ended civilizations that existed before your kind learned to use fire. Una kept reading. Torvax's 4 eyes narrowed. This was not the reaction he expected. When he declared war on other species, they begged. They cried. They fell to their knees and asked for mercy. This small creature did not even look at him. Today, Torvax continued, his voice getting louder, we declare total and complete war upon humanity. We will destroy your colonies. We will burn your fleets. We will hunt down every last one of your kind until none remain. Una held up one finger. Wait. She finished reading her paragraph. Then she dog-eared the page to save her place. Finally, she looked up. Sorry, she said. Her voice was calm and pleasant. I was at a really good part. The hero just found out his sister is alive. Very exciting. She tucked the book under her arm. You were saying something? The chamber was completely silent. No one had ever spoken to Torvax this way. Not once in his 200 years of life. War, Torvax said. His voice was colder now, dangerous. I declared war on your species. Oh, right, war. Una pulled out a small tablet and started typing. I will file the report with our defense council. Should take about 6 months to process. Maybe 8. We have a lot of paperwork these days. You do not fear us? Una stopped typing. She looked at the massive alien on his throne of bones. She looked at the thousands of soldiers that surrounded him. She looked at the flags of the conquered species. Then she smiled. It was a small, tired smile. The kind of smile that old soldiers have when they hear young men talk about glory. Commander, she said, let me ask you a question. Do you know how many wars humanity has fought? Not against aliens. Against each other. Before we even left Earth, Torvax did not answer. Over 15,000 recorded conflicts. Big wars. Small wars. Wars that lasted 100 years. Wars that killed millions of people. She put her tablet away. We have been fighting since we climbed down from the trees. It is what we do. It is what we are. She started walking toward the throne. The guards moved to stop her, but Torvax raised his hand. He wanted to hear what she had to say. We built weapons that could crack our own planet in half. Weapons that could burn whole cities in seconds. And you know what we did after that? She stopped at the base of the throne. We built more. Bigger ones. Better ones. Because someone might attack us. Because we might need them. Because we are always ready for war. The silence in the chamber was heavy now. The conquered species watched with wide eyes. They had never seen anyone speak to the Vulcan like this. So no, Commander. I do not fear you. Yuna turned and walked back toward her seat. I just hope your generals have read their history. Because ours have. And we remember every lesson. She sat down in her chair. She opened her book. She found her page, and she kept reading. Torvax stared at her for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that filled the chamber. You are brave, little human. Or stupid. We shall see which one. Yuna did not look up. 6 months, Commander. That is how long you have before our answer comes. Use the time wisely. She turned another page, and somewhere, in the back of the chamber, a member of one of the conquered species felt something he had not felt in years. It was small and weak, but it was their hope. 3 weeks passed after the declaration of war. The Velen did not wait for the human response. They never did. They believed in striking first and striking hard. That was how they had conquered 47 species. That was how they would conquer the 40-8th dot. The Velen 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace about a small human colony called New Bizin. It was a mining world. Nothing special. 30,000 humans lived there with their families. Miners, farmers, teachers, children. Easy targets, at least. That was what the Velen thought. Fleet Commander Vorax looked at the planet on his screen. It was brown and dusty. The humans had built their city in a valley between 2 mountain ranges. There was only one way in and one way out. Perfect for a siege. Send the message, Vorax ordered. Tell them to surrender. We will make their deaths quick if they do. The message was sent. The response came back in less than a minute. It was from a young man named Jiho. He was the colony's defense coordinator. He was 26 years old. He had never fought in a real war before. The message was short. You picked the wrong colony. We are from old Bizan. Our grandparents survived worse than you. Come and try. Vorax laughed when he read it. The arrogance of these creatures. They had no fleet. They had no heavy weapons. They were miners and farmers. What could they possibly do against the might of the Velen war machine? He ordered the landing. 10,000 Velen soldiers descended on the colony in dropships. They wore heavy armor that could stop most weapons. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. They were the finest soldiers in the galaxy. They landed in perfect formation outside the city. They marched toward the main gate. Everything was going according to plan. Then the first explosion happened. The ground under the lead column collapsed. 50 soldiers fell into a pit filled with sharpened metal spikes. They screamed as they died. Before the others could react, more explosions went off. Buildings that looked abandoned turned out to be full of traps. Streets that seemed safe were covered with hidden mines. The Velen had walked into a kill zone. For 3 weeks, while the diplomats talked, the people of New Bizin had prepared. They knew the Velen would come for them first. Small colonies always got hit first. So they got ready. An old woman named Yunji led the engineering teams. She was 73 years old. Her hands shook when she held them still. But when she held a detonator, They were steady as rock. My grandmother survived the siege of Incheon. She told her workers as they dug tunnels under the city. She told me stories when I was a little girl. She told me how to fight when you cannot win, how to make them bleed for every meter. The tunnels connected every building in the city. They were too small for the Velen to fit through, but humans could move through them easily. Children as young as 12 served as message runners. They crawled through the dark passages, carrying information from one group of fighters to another. A man named Do-won commanded the defense. He was a former Marine. He had retired to this quiet mining colony to raise his family. Now his family was hiding in the deep shelters, and he was back at war. Do not try to hold any position, he told his people through the radio. Hit them, hurt them, then disappear. Make them afraid of every shadow. The Velen were not used to this. They were used to enemies who stood and fought. Enemies who tried to defend walls and gates. Enemies who could be seen and killed. These humans were ghosts. A shot would come from a window. Velen soldiers would storm the building. They would find nothing but empty rooms and more traps. A bomb would go off in a street. They would search for the bomber. They would find only scared civilians who claimed to know nothing. Hours passed. The Velen lost more and more soldiers. Their formations broke apart as they chased enemies they could not catch. Yoonji sat in a small room deep underground. In front of her was a simple switch. Above her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of the Velen Forward Command Unit. They had set up their headquarters in what they thought was an empty warehouse. She pressed the switch. 6 tons of rubble buried them all. Eung dusted the concrete powder off her jacket. Her granddaughter, a girl named Somi, stared at her with wide eyes. Grandmother, I know, child. Yoonji stood up. Her old bones creaked. Come, there is more work to do. By the time the sun set, the Velen had lost 4,000 soldiers. They had expected to lose none. Their equipment was scattered across the city. The humans had taken their weapons, their armor, their supplies. Fleet Commander Vorax ordered a retreat. His soldiers pulled back to their dropships. They flew back to orbit. They did not understand what had happened. They had never lost a battle before. Jiho sent one final message as they left. Thanks for the equipment. Come back anytime. Vorax stared at the message. His hands were shaking. Not with fear, with rage. These insects had humiliated him. They would pay for this. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a question. If this is what a mining colony can do, what can their real soldiers do? He pushed the thought away. It was too frightening to consider. On the surface below, the people of New Bizan came out of their shelters. They looked at the burning Velen equipment. They looked at the empty streets where the enemy had fled. Do-hwan stood on a rooftop, watching the dropships disappear into the sky. His wife came to stand beside him. She took his hand. Is it over? She asked. No, he said. It is just beginning. But now they know. Now they understand. Understand what? Do-hwan smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf baring its teeth. That we do not break. We do not run. We fight. And we win. Across human space, the news spread. A small colony had beaten back the Velen. It could be done. They could be hurt. The war had truly begun. High Commander Torvax was not happy. He sat on his throne of bones and listened to the reports. They were all bad. New Bizan was just the beginning. The Velen attacked 5 more human colonies in the following weeks. 3 of them fell. But the cost was terrible. For every colony they took, they lost 10 times more soldiers than they expected. The humans fought for every street, every building, every room. They did not surrender. They did not run. They made the Velen pay in blood for every step forward, and the 2 colonies that did not fall. They fought so hard that the Velen had to retreat. The humans there were still alive, still free, still dangerous. "Explain this to me," Torvak said. His voice was quiet. That was worse than when he shouted. "We have conquered 47 species. We have ended civilizations. How are we losing to these small pink creatures?" His intelligence chief stepped forward. His name was Vren. He was smaller than most Velen, but his mind was sharp. He had spent his whole life studying enemies, finding their weaknesses, destroying them from the inside. But humans were different, and that scared him. "Aye, Commander," Vren said. "I have studied the humans for many weeks now. I have read their history. I have watched recordings of their past wars. I have interviewed prisoners. And what did you learn?" Vren activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air. Human soldiers from different times in history. Humans with swords. Humans with guns. Humans with ships and tanks and weapons that could destroy cities. They are unusual, Commander. Unlike any species we have faced before. How so? Most species fight to survive. When they are losing, they surrender. They try to save what they can. They accept defeat. Vren paused. Humans do not do this. Torvax leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean they keep fighting. Even when they are losing. Even when there is no hope. Even when surrender would save their lives. Vren changed the image. It showed a battle from human history. Soldiers charging into certain death. They have a concept we do not have a word for. They call it spite. Spite? Yes, it means they will hurt themselves if it means hurting their enemy more. They will die if it means making their enemy bleed. They consider this rational. Torvax was silent for a long moment. This made no sense to him. The Velen were practical. They fought to win. They did not throw away lives for nothing. There is more, Vren continued. They have a cultural tradition of celebrating defeats. Celebrating defeats? That is madness. Yes, but it is effective madness. Another image appeared. A narrow mountain pass. This is a place called Thermopylae. 3,000 years ago, 300 human soldiers held this pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die. They fought anyway. They were remembered as heroes. Why would anyone celebrate a defeat? Because it inspires others to fight harder. They lose a battle and become more dangerous. We have never faced this before, Commander. We break our enemies by defeating them. But defeating humans only makes them angrier. Torvax stood up from his throne. He walked down the steps slowly. His heavy feet made the floor shake with each step. What do you suggest we do? Vren did not have an answer. That was the most frightening thing of all. Far across the galaxy, a different meeting was happening. Admiral Sujin stood at the center of a war room. She was tall for a human woman. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined with years and experience. She had fought in 3 wars before this one. She had won them all. Around her sat the other fleet commanders. Taeyang, young and eager, commanded the fast attack ships. Minji, calm and thoughtful, commanded the heavy carriers. Hyunwoo, old and scarred, commanded the ground forces. The Velen think this is a war of conquest, Sujin said. Her voice was cold and clear. They think they can take our worlds one by one. They think we will surrender when things get bad. She looked at each of her commanders in turn. They are wrong. On the screen behind her, maps appeared. Velen space. Human space. The front lines where both met. We are going to teach them what war really means. Not their kind of war. Our kind of war. She pointed at the maps. We do not defend. We attack. We do not wait for them to come to us. We go to them. We hit them where they do not expect it. Taeyong raised his hand. Admiral, they outnumber us 7-1. Their ships are bigger. Their weapons are stronger. How do we win against those odds? Sujin smiled. It was not a friendly smile. They outnumber us. So what? They are not used to losing. They do not know how to handle pain. They do not understand sacrifice. She pulled up more images. Famous battles from human history. Dunkirk, Stalingrad, Incheon. We have been the underdog before. We have faced bigger enemies. We have won, and if we lose, then we make losing so expensive that they wish they had never heard of us. We burn their ships. We kill their soldiers. We make them bleed. And even if we fall so hard that they will never forget us. They will tell stories about humans for 1,000 years. They will warn their children about us. The room was quiet. Every commander understood. This was not just a war. This was a fight for survival. And humans have been fighting for survival since the beginning of their history. Prepare the fleets, Sujin ordered. We move in 1 week. And when we move, we do not stop until this is over. She turned to look at the stars through the window. Somewhere out there, the Velen were waiting. They thought they knew what war was. They had no idea, but they would learn. Sujin would make sure of that. One way or another, they would learn. 6 months had passed since the war began. The Velen had expected victory by now. They had expected broken humans begging for mercy. They had expected to add another flag to the walls of the Grand Chamber. Instead, they were losing. Not quickly. Not obviously. But every week, the reports got worse. Human attacks came from nowhere. Supply lines were cut. Outposts went silent. Ships disappeared into the dark between stars and never came back. Hi, Commander Torvax received a report from his frontline generals. He read it in silence. His 4 red eyes grew darker with each line. They are not fighting like normal enemies, the report said. Their pilots fly in ways that should kill them. They accept damage that would destroy any other crew. They ram their ships into ours when they are too damaged to fight. They die laughing. Laughing. The word stayed in Torvax's mind. What kind of creature laughed at death? On a prison station near the front lines, a Velen interrogator worked on a human captive. Her name was Hannah. She was a nurse. She had been captured when her medical ship was attacked. She was small and thin and looked like she would break easily. She did not break. They used pain. She screamed, but she did not give them information. They used fear. She looked them in the eye and smiled. They used threats against her friends, the other prisoners. She spat in their faces. Why do you resist? The interrogator demanded. You cannot win. Your friends are dead. Your ship is destroyed. Give us what we want and the pain will stop. Hannah looked at him. Her face was bloody. Her body was broken. But her eyes were bright and fierce. You want to know why? She laughed. It was a rough, painful sound. Because even if I die here, you will remember me. You will remember that you could not break me. And every time you try to break another human, you will think of me. And you will be afraid. She started to sing. The other prisoners heard her voice through the walls. They did not know the words, but they learned them. Soon, they were all singing. A dozen voices, then 20, then 50. The whole prison rang with human songs. The Velen guards did not know what to do. They had never seen anything like this. Prisoners were supposed to be scared. Prisoners were supposed to beg. These humans sang songs of defiance until their voices gave out. Hannah died 3 days later. She never stopped smiling. Meanwhile, Admiral Sujin made her move. The human fleet gathered in secret. Hundreds of ships of all sizes, fast destroyers, heavy battleships, carriers full of fighters. They came from every corner of human space. They left their colonies undefended. They took everything they had. We are going straight for their heart, Sujin told her captains. Velen Prime, their homeworld, their capital. Taeyong stared at her. Admiral, that is impossible. They have 100 defense stations around that planet. They have 3 fleets guarding it. We will be destroyed before we get close. They expect us to be logical, Sujin said. They expect us to defend our own territory. They expect us to play safe. She smiled. We are not going to do any of those things. We are going to do something crazy. Something they will never expect. She pulled up the battle plan on the screen. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of thing the Velen would never do. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants because no one thought it was possible. The Doolittle raid hit Tokyo when Japan thought they were safe. The Tet offensive struck everywhere at once and broke the enemy's wall. Sujin looked at her officers. We will do the same. We will hit them at home. We will show them that nowhere is safe. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. They traveled for 2 weeks. They avoided every patrol. They hid in the shadows of dead stars. They came closer and closer to Velen Prime. And on the anniversary of the war declaration, they arrived. The Velen were celebrating. 1 year since they had declared war on the humans. They expected to be celebrating victory soon. Instead, the sky filled with human ships. The battle was terrible. The humans were outnumbered. They were outgunned, but they did not care. They fought like demons. Their ships moved in ways the Velen computers said were impossible. Their pilots took damage that should have killed them. They kept fighting. 18 hours. That was how long the battle lasted. 18 hours of fire and blood and death. Human crews worked without rest. When someone fell, another took their place. When ships were damaged, the crew patched them together and kept fighting. When they ran out of missiles, they used their ships as weapons. At hour 12, a destroyer named the Indomitable was hit badly. Its engines were gone. Its weapons were dead. It was drifting toward a Velen carrier. The captain, a man named Jungwoo, had a choice. He could abandon ship. He could surrender. He could save himself and his crew. He pointed his dying ship at the carrier's bridge and hit full thrust. Tell my daughter I love her, he said on the radio. The Indomitable hit the carrier at maximum speed. Both ships exploded together. The carrier was destroyed. 5,000 Velen died. Jungwoo and his crew died too. But they died fighting. At hour 18, the Velen defense fleet broke. They ran. They scattered. They abandoned their posts. They had never lost before. They did not know how to handle it. Human Marines landed on Velen Prime. They fought through the streets of the capital. They broke down the doors of the Grand Chamber. They planted their flag where Torvax's throne had stood. A young sergeant named Minho stood in the center of the chamber. He looked up at the flags of the conquered species. He looked at the bones that had made the throne. You should not have interrupted her book, he said. Then he pulled down the Velen flag and raised the human one in its place. Across the galaxy, humans cheered. On 100 worlds, people cried with joy. The impossible had happened, but the war was not over yet. There was still one more thing to do. It was time for the Velen to learn the final lesson. The Grand Chamber looked different now. The flags of the conquered species still hung on the walls. But the throne of bones was gone. Human soldiers had torn it apart and burned the pieces. No one would ever sit on the suffering of others again. High Commander Torvax knelt on the cold stone floor. His armor was gone. His weapons were gone. His pride was gone. He was just a defeated old creature now. Nothing more. Around him stood the remains of his government. Generals who had never lost a battle. Advisors who had planned the conquest of 47 species. All of them on their knees. All of them waiting to learn their fate. The doors opened. Yuna walked in. She looked the same as she had 1 year ago. Simple gray clothes, black hair tied back, calm face, and under her arm, the same warm paperback book she had been reading when the war was declared. She walked to the center of the chamber. She did not hurry. She did not look angry or happy or sad. She just looked tired. Very, very tired. A chair was brought for her. She sat down across from Torvax. For a long moment, she did not speak. She just looked at him. 1 year, she finally said. 1 year since you declared war on us. 1 year since I sat in this chamber and tried to warn you. Torvax said nothing. What was there to say? Do you remember what I told you? Yuna asked. I told you that we had fought over 15,000 wars against each other. I told you that we had built weapons that could destroy our own world. I told you to read your history. I remember, Torvax said. His voice was empty, but you did not listen. Yuna leaned forward. You thought we were weak because we were small. You thought we were stupid because we were young. You thought you could break us because you had broken so many others. She shook her head slowly. You understood nothing. Torvax looked up at her. His 4 red eyes were dull now. The fire that had burned in them was gone. Why? He asked. Why do you fight like this? What drives your species to such madness? You could have surrendered. You could have saved millions of lives. Instead, you threw everything away. For what? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the book in her hands. She turned it over slowly. There is a story I want to tell you, she said. A story from our history. It is about a place called Thermopylae. Your intelligence chief mentioned this place. Then you know the basics. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they were going to die. They fought anyway. Yuna looked at Torvax. Do you know why we remember them? It was not because they won. They lost. Every single one of them died. Then why remember them? Because they showed what humans can do. They showed that we do not give up. They showed that we will fight against any odds, for any reason, until our last breath. Yuna smiled softly. We tell their story to our children. We have told it for 3,000 years. And we will tell it for 3,000 more. She held up the book. This is a story too. It is about a man who fights against impossible odds. He loses friends. He loses family. He loses everything. But he keeps fighting because he believes in something. She set the book on the table between them. We have millions of stories like this. Billions. They teach us who we are. They teach us never to surrender. Never to stop. Never to give up. Torvax stared at the small paper book. Such a simple thing. Such a powerful thing. You wanted to know what drives us, Yuna continued. It is this. Stories. Songs. The memory of everyone who came before us and refused to bow. We carry them with us always. We fight for them as much as we fight for ourselves. She stood up. The war is over. You have lost. But I am not here to punish you. I am here to teach you. She walked to the wall where the flags of the conquered species hung. She reached up and touched one of them. It was old and faded. 47 species. How many of them do you even remember? Do you know their names? Their stories? Their songs? Torvax said nothing. Of course you do not. You took everything from them. You erased them. Yuna turned back to face him. That is what you wanted to do to us. Erase us. Add our flag to your wall. Forget we ever existed. She walked back to stand in front of him. But you failed. And now you will learn the lesson that we learned long ago. What lesson? Yuna crouched down so she could look him in the eyes. The universe is cruel, Commander. It does not care about empires or conquest or power. Stars die. Worlds end. Species disappear. The only thing that survives is will. The will to keep going. The will to remember. The will to fight even when there is no hope. She stood up again. You declared war on humanity, but you never understood what that meant. You saw a small species on a small planet and thought we would be easy to break. You were wrong. She picked up her book. We do not fear war, Commander. We were born in it. We grew in it. It is in our blood and our bones and our souls. Every generation of humans has known war, and every generation has survived. She walked toward the door. Your empire is finished. Your power is broken. But you are still alive. You still have a chance to be something more than a conqueror. She stopped at the door and looked back. Learn from us. Learn to tell stories that matter. Learn to remember the ones who came before. Learn to fight for something bigger than yourself. She opened the door. Or do not learn. The choice is yours. But either way, remember this day. Remember how a species you thought you could erase came to your homeworld and brought you to your knees. She smiled one last time. And remember the woman who sat in your throne room, reading a book while you declared war on everything she loved. Remember that she was not afraid, because she knew something you did not. What? Torvax asked. That we have been fighting since the beginning of time, and we will still be fighting long after you are forgotten. She walked out. The doors closed behind her. Torvax stayed on his knees for a long time. Around him, the other Velen were silent. They had nothing to say, nothing to add. On the wall above them, 47 flags hung in rows. The flags of species they had conquered, species they had broken, species they had forgotten. But there would never be a 48th flag. The humans had made sure of that dot, and somewhere in the galaxy, on 100 different worlds, people looked up at the stars and knew that they were free, that they were safe, that humanity had faced the darkness and won. Not because they were the biggest dot, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up dot, and that made all the difference.